What is going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good time. It's been a minute, but me and Gray are back. Gray, what's going on, man?
Man, I am happy to be back. It's been a little while, but we got football season swinging around. We got
Yes.
NHL off season. We got
Yes.
NBA off season. There is a
Yes.
lot to talk about in Carolina sports coming up here pretty soon. So, man, I'm ready to hop back in it.
I know, and I am so stoked to be back. If you haven't been here before, this is All Access, your home for sports in the Carolinas and the Queen City, talking all things professional sports. We're talking your Panthers, we're talking your Hornets. Occasionally, we'll dive into the Hurricanes and the Charlotte FC once that gets rolling and kicked into high gear. But I think right now, man, some of the biggest things that are happening in sports is obviously football. Camp is back. They just had their little practice in front of the fans. There's a lot happening down there. A lot of national recognition, I think, for the Carolina Panthers right now. Like they're making a little bit of noise. People are saying they might be a sleeper overall. I'm gonna jump right into it. Are you buying into that?
Absolutely, I'm buying into it, man. I think there's a lot of people speaking in one direction, and I think that is keeping up with that stigma that they're a young team that has an uncertain quarterback, and a lot of people are doubters, man. And I,
Yeah.
I see that a lot too. But I think here around these parts, we know what Matt Rule is trying to build with this team. We know the young potential that we have in some of these guys that are now coming into their second, third, fourth season with us. So, I'm excited. I think there are a lot of people in the NFL who are they're not ready for the Panthers maybe to kind of step in and be a new young force, especially in the NFC South.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree, specifically with that NFC South comment. I mean, if you agree with us in the chat, please hop in the chat, help drive the direction of the show. As always, we want your input. If you're watching it live, hop in here. If you're watching it in post, find us on Twitter and such. But speaking of the NFC South, man, like there's a lot of people that are out there saying that the Panthers are the future. Drew Brees, gone. Tom Brady, aging out. Atlanta Falcons, they get rid of Julio Jones. Matt Ryan's getting up there. They're going to have a complete overhaul. Panthers are the ones that have restructured and kind of put the foundation down for their future. They're saying this is what we want. We have this extremely young defensive core. We have great skill position players offensively. And I think, yeah, I mean, I'm buying into the hype for sure. One thing that I'm not buying into is that Madden rating that I know you saw, where they're ranked second worst team in the league for the Madden rating. What?
Ah, gosh, unbelievable. Behind the
I
only
can't.
team behind us is the Jets. I mean,
Yeah,
man, that's a pretty bad rap for the Jets who just tried to overhaul their team a little bit, especially offensively. The Jets defense is going to be terrible, but
yeah.
their offense has a couple weapons here and there. Like I might even have thrown like Detroit like below them. Man, I was surprised. I think part of the reason that people are starting to notice the Panthers maybe as a sleeper is those dumb Madden ratings come out. And I think everybody knows that we're better than that,
Oh,
man. I
yeah.
think people were like, "Oh, come on, give the Panthers a little more credit than that."
Yes, exactly. The general population is saying, "Well, hold on now. Like they have Brian Burns, and they have Jeremy Chin, who was almost defensive rookie of the year. Like they have pieces. You gave Christian McCaffrey a
Unreal.
99. Like you have him and DJ Moore. Like you have so many players that they've been hyping up all year in the offseason of saying like, hey, look out for this player. Look out for this
I
guy.
looked at the ratings for us today, and Jeremy Chin is an 80 overall in
Yeah,
this game.
that's a
Like to start
trash.
off with, that is a crime. That's a crime.
Yeah,
Like he really was a couple steps away from winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, and you're gonna swing around and give that man an 80 overall the next year?
yeah.
It's blasphemy. It really is,
Offended.
man. It is. I'm gonna say it too. I think
Do
it's
it.
small market biases in terms of
Absolutely.
in big market biases. You're going to see guys for big markets get big ratings because they're the ones who get publicized. they
Yeah.
they they get on TV, and I feel mightily disrespected with the Madden ratings this year. Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
know what, it's going to be really fun at the end of the season to look at the updated Madden
Yes.
ratings for this game and see how bad Madden really was at trying to determine how good this team is. Because I'll tell you what, man, they're better than second from the bottom. If we wind up
Oh,
with the number 2 overall pick next year, I would be blatantly shocked.
yeah, I just don't understand. Like, I get that there's a lot of pieces that needed to be fixed in the offseason for the Carolina Panthers, and we'll get into that obviously at some point. But when you look at this, like, there's no way the Texans with their current roster should be rated. I don't care what your record's going to be. The Panthers are clearly not going to have a worse record than them. But when you look at just the players that remain on that team, there's no reason the Texans, the Lions, possibly even the Jaguars should be above them in terms of just a player skill set rating.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And teams with rookie quarterbacks potentially starting above the Panthers, where I know Sam Darnold hasn't been like a masterful quarterback in his seasons so far, but you're getting a guy who's still like 23 years old, stepping into his fourth season. So you're going to tell me that guy doesn't have potentially a better foundation to start off and carry a team than a guy who's brand new in this league? I just don't see it, man. I think it was a little embarrassing. I have this theory. I tweeted this the other day. Yeah. I think Madden, with their player ratings every year, I think they botch them on purpose. I think they purposefully get them really bad. So it spurs up a huge conversation, and they say, do you agree with our ratings? And people go, no, this guy should have been way higher. This guy is way overrated. And people start chattering about it, and it blows Madden up. And even if it, I feel like Madden kind of lives by that philosophy, like any publicity is good publicity, even if people think our ratings are terrible,
It's funny you say that. I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, I think it's kind of the Starbucks theory, where there's a lot of people who say they intentionally misspell the names on the cups just so you post it to your Instagram story and say, that is not how you spell Michaela. Who spells Brandon with 4 R's? And it's like, what? Like, that whole effect of just getting people to screenshot it and put it out there and be like, dude, that's my boy, Jeremy Chin. Not a chance he's an 80. Like, that is ridiculous. And it forces people to talk about it. So, I don't think that's a far reach.
And the top 10 lists that they put out, it'll be like EA Madden's top 10 running backs, top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 corners. They do it for every position group. And that causes the most controversy I've ever seen. People get in there and fight for their life about some of these players in the comments, and it is so funny. And I think at this point, Madden's done it on purpose. They figured it out. They're like, we'll do a couple that make sense. We'll throw a few curveballs in there, and we'll let everybody just eat each other alive in the comments and soak it all in. So, I mean, hey, kudos to them if they've got it figured out. But I feel like that's more work on them. They're going to have to keep updating all their ratings. And
I wouldn't want to be in charge of
kind of owning that they didn't do well.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in charge of the social media or be in charge of the actual Madden ratings. As fun as it sounds to be in charge of the Madden ratings, like, we've already talked about how, like, critical people are of the rating. Like, I would not want that responsibility.
Oh, and the recency bias of the ratings is unbelievable. It is so terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a what have you done for me lately, with the exception of Christian McCaffrey, who I think got a lot of flack because he is the number 1 rated running back, even though he missed literally all of last season. So,
hey, I mean, 6 touchdowns in 3 games. Hard to argue with.
Still worth it. One guy that you kind of alluded to earlier on is Sam Darnold. I know that we're sticking strictly to sports when we discuss most of these players most of the time on here. So Sam Darnold, what have you seen so far? What have you liked, whether it's on the field, off the field, his overall persona? What are you thinking about Sam Darnold being the leader of this Carolina Panthers offense this year?
I think, we talked about this several months ago, Bradley, but the first thing that excites me is when you see a couple of these clips from training camp of just his ability to extend the football field. You know what I mean? When you talk about the difference of what this team is going to experience under his leadership at quarterback this year versus Teddy Bridgewater is the fact that Sam Darnold can throw the ball, 60 yards in air, and he can connect down the field with some pretty solid accuracy. So, when you have guys like DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson and now Terrace Marshall, who I'd love to talk about in a little bit, Christian McCaffrey even coming out of the flats, like you have now the ability with Sam Darnold to reach so many different levels of the field. You can hit short range, mid range, long range, and that's something that last year we simply didn't have the ability to do. And so defenses, they clamp down on you and they crowd the space at the line of scrimmage, and they blitz a lot because they know that all they have to do is cover short yardage, and if they can do that and get to you quick, then that you're done. So his ability to extend the field to me is exciting. The consistency for me, I think, is going to be the biggest concern or maybe, talking point for a lot of people. He can connect downfield when you see him at his best. When he's at his worst and he's got people in his face and he's having to try to move outside the pocket, I think he's really inconsistent sometimes. His accuracy suffers a lot outside the pocket. We need to treat this guy a lot like a Ben Roethlisberger, I think, in terms of how we use him under center. And if we can do that and get him comfortable back there and get him progressing through his reads, he has every ability to hit any target at all three levels of the offense. And I think that's something that we haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, I think as a stationary unit, stationary quarterback, he can absolutely launch the ball. He throws it with, from what I've seen, when he has steady feet, he can throw the ball. He can hit he can be accurate. And he does have that plethora of targets that you just mentioned, and we're going to go straight into that one. He has DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, David Moore, Dan Arnold. They pick up another tight end in the draft. He now has Shi Smith, who people brought in and are really high on. Omar Bay. They have so many people that there's no way they can keep all of them. But Terrace Marshall has been really stunning so far in camp, and I think these two guys are going to have a real connection, real chemistry for the Carolina Panthers.
I'm so impressed by the young guys and their grit on offense. Absolutely. When you talk about DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson coming back as a duo again, I think that's super exciting because that's two guys who can open up the field, at all three levels. Once again, good route runners with speed. DJ, has a great ability to meet the ball in the air and attack the football. Consistency with Race Stone, who comes back to the football, who attacks the football, who doesn't wait, is super aggressive. That's going to be very, very helpful for him to have a steady guy like DJ. I think you're going to see a season from DJ Moore this year that I think people knew was possible, but we're starting to feel like just wasn't there. I think this guy has been working with two quarterbacks who, and I don't want to get into the Cam discussion like this, but, his shoulder was hurt. His throwing ability was clearly impacted, by that. And I love Cam. I'm all for Cam. But for several seasons there, he wasn't the same. And then the Panthers unfortunately part ways with him. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater, who, in my opinion, had no better throwing ability than Cam did at the time with his injured shoulder. So DJ Moore, for essentially his entire career, has no idea how good he is because he's never had a guy who can really connect with him at all three levels of the offense. And now he does. And Panther fans get to see that for the first time this season.
And they should be ecstatic.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
DJ Moore, he's had, 2 back-to-back 1,200-yard seasons. And as you said, under the circumstances as being, honestly, 2 of the worst teams in the NFL, we have to, not embrace it, but we have to admit that these teams were bottom tier over the last 2 years in terms of standings, offensive production, quarterback play from Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke and Teddy Bridgewater combined once Cam Newton went down. So we're not sure
what he's capable of. And notice every name you just said, too, doesn't have a cannon. Like, none of those guys are chucking the ball 60, 70 yards downfield into the pocket of the receiver. So to have a guy like that for us is just going to be it's why Sam Darnold was drafted as high as he was in the first place. The guy has pure raw talent at quarterback. He has an insane arm when he can put everything together. And what I've loved from this coaching staff building him is that they're getting back to the basics. They're not trying to get too fancy with this thing. They're trying to get his footwork right in the pocket so that he can stand in there and go through his progressions and not make tons of movement, but subtle movements. Like, we don't need him running outside the pocket an extra 20 yards trying to make a throw on the run. But his ability, like a Big Ben or a Matt Stafford, to take 2 to 3 to 4 steps inside the pocket to avoid one sense of pressure and then make that throw early. Yeah. If they can get him on that on a consistent level, this is a super, super dangerous team. We haven't even talked about that Robbie Anderson scored 11 touchdowns in Sam Darnold's best season with him. And on top of that, Terrace Marshall Jr. is going to be a consistent slot option for this team. I think he's going to be so good this year that I think the Panthers are going to consider, when Robbie or DJ's contract is up, they're going to let one of them go to keep Terrace. He's that good.
I don't disagree.
This guy is coming out of an offense at LSU that The last time, he was really in action with them was putting up a really significant amount of production with Joe Burrow at quarterback there. This guy's no joke, man. I mean, he
No.
was a big part of that offense, breaking records for LSU. At that time, he was listed at 6'2". I watched an interview with him, I think from yesterday or
Huge.
2 days ago. They asked him. They said, "You're listed at 6'2", whatever." Well, I can't remember what they told him, that he was officially listed as. But he responded that they said, what are you? How big are you?
What are
And
you?
he goes, I'm 6'4". And, and,
Yeah.
and they were like 6'4". He's like, I'm 6'4". And they were like, how much do you weigh? And he was like 210 pounds. I weigh 210, 6'4", 210. Rookie season, 6'4", 210 in the slot. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like that on top of DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Plus, Terrace Marshall has full field touchdown potential. So now you have
Yep.
three guys who can extend the field at three levels, and a guy who's 6'4". He's got some big hands who can go up and get a football. Like, this offense is so scary. And then out of the backfield, you have possibly the best running back in the entire NFL, the most versatile
Best
offensive player in
catching
the
for
league.
sure.
If this team can just figure out a way to protect Sam Darnold and get him into a consistent rhythm, there's absolutely no reason that this offense can't produce with any of the others in the top 10. I truthfully believe that.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of their best offensive years that we've had in a long time. I mean, obviously, if you look at it, the Cam Newton Super Bowl run, it was a defensive-led team, but those offensive
Sure.
numbers that they were putting up were phenomenal. I think there was something like through the first 10 weeks, they were averaging like 39 points a game in that season. Like, it was
Yep.
ridiculous how far ahead they were over the second place team, which was the Patriots at the time. And people are saying this is a defensive-led team, a defensive-led team. It's like, okay, hold on now,
Sure.
because you're still putting up ridiculous yards with not a whole lot of talent, let it be known. But now, Sam Darnold absolutely has some weapons, or whoever it's going to be QB1. We're clearly under the assumption it's Sam Darnold, but he has
Sure.
freakish athletes from the tight ends to the running backs, like you just mentioned, a ton of versatile pieces. They'll probably be rotating them in frequently and just to keep the legs fresh throughout the entire game. If they do make a run into the playoffs, it's good to have a lot of depth at all of these skill positions, because we saw what
Sure.
happened last year when Christian McCaffrey goes down. Yeah, it hurt. If DJ Moore were to have gone down, or Robbie Anderson were to have missed more games, like, they would have been in a really, really tough spot where Curtis Samuel at the end of the year was the guy that you had to rely on to make things happen. So I'm excited to see exactly what's going to happen with them. We've talked a little bit about Terrace Marshall and some of these grabs that he's made in camp so far. We're going to get into some surprises and thoughts real quick on some of the I want to talk about the veteran guys that they've brought in. Daquan Jones. Well, actually, you know what? We'll hop into the chat because I see a couple of comments. If you're here, please reach into the chat. Give us some shout outs. David Brown says, what's your biggest concerns with the Panthers heading into this year? And David Screws says, not only the offense, but the defense is very scary too. And that's what I was going to get into with some of these veterans. So I'll hop into that one first. You talk about this defensive line bringing in Morgan Fox, who's already said, hey, I want to bring in all the things that me and Aaron Donald have done together, who I'm going to trust, because that is a good system to trust. That there's a lot of really, really good athletes there. But then you look at who came from Arizona. What was his name? I'm drawing a blank. Not Perriman, not Fox. Hassan Reddick with their little bet that they have going on with Burns on one side, Reddick on the other. That is going to be scary. And I am here for it.
And such an improvement from last season too. I mean, I don't think people understand that how big of an improvement that is to deepen your defensive line. When the Panthers went to the Super Bowl in 2015, their defensive line cycled like 6 or 7 players very consistently. And that's what won them those games. It's not that they had a superstar on the outside necessarily. It's that they were deep, and they just kept throwing those guys in there. And so this defense now has definitely one superstar, certainly 2 really, really good players on the outside, in Burns and Reddick. And then they've got the guys to rotate underneath them. Don't forget, Derek Brown's coming into his second season at defensive tackle. To have that extra year of putting muscle on, shedding some of that extra, body weight, turning that into, him being a bigger, stronger, faster player on the inside. it's going to be really exciting. Brian Burns obviously is going to be bigger, stronger, faster too, just like he was last season. I think he's going to be the most exciting player on this defense that people talk about by the end of the year. And I don't think that's going to come as a surprise to anybody.
Yeah.
Jeremy Chin is another guy that I know everybody is just absolutely super high on, and including myself. The most versatile player on defense on our team, maybe in the entire NFL.
Could be.
The guy is unbelievable. And now he's going back to his true position at safety. This defense is scary, man. And the thing is we've talked about all these pieces. I want to touch on something that David Brown asked in the chat. And by the way, we missed you too, David. I appreciate the
thanks, David,
as well. But one of my biggest concerns with this team, man, is not the potential. It's not the talent. All of it is there on both sides of the football, offense and defense. My concern with this team is it's a young team still, right? And so even with all the potential that's there, even though young is good in a lot of cases, there are also cases where, football is a long season and the playoffs make it longer. And so for this team, for, setting expectations for this team, I think it's very viable that this is a great team. I think they have every shot to win this conference. Or rather division, excuse me, but maybe the conference, but certainly the division. The thing about it is, man, is they have got to find a way to make it through the tough moments in this season, right? Yep. Because no season is going to come without some bumps in the road or some injuries. And, these young guys need to find a way to make it through the tough moments in this season. I know they're going to have some highs because they're that good. But they need to really be able to ride out the lows and get back to consistent football when that happens. If a captain goes down, a veteran goes down and gets injured, they've got to be a next man up. Like I'm ready to be the captain now type of team. What's exciting is I think they are. I think a lot of guys are ready for that. I think Jeremy Chin is captain material for this team.
Yeah.
And is coming into just his second season. Robbie Anderson's come in and made a very quick impact as a kind of a veteran now on this team.
Robbie.
Like you're seeing, there's so many guys like that I could point at and say at any given moment that guy could step up and make a play and inspire some guys with some energy on the field. So as long as this team can find a way to keep their head in it and power through the tough moments in the season and replace it with good energy and making a play, I think they have a lot of potential. That's where I'm looking at them though this season is can they make it through back-to-back losses and come out on the other side a better team.
Yeah, and we mentioned the addition to the defensive line. We've mentioned the defensive backs. There's still some kinks to work out there because J.C. Horn, A.J. Bouye, who we haven't really talked about, there are a lot of really good pieces. My one worry is something that David Screws actually just mentioned into the comments here is the linebacking position. Like Shaq Thompson, Luke Kuechly, God bless him, love him to death. Sad he's gone. Luke Kuechly leaves, Shaq Thompson's kind of thrusted into that captain role. Like they just assume he's going to stop over.
Sure.
No one can just become a Luke Kuechly. But he's put into that position. And I'm not going to say it was a failed experiment last year, but I don't think that he took the steps that we thought he was going to be able to take. Jermaine Carter is now, in most camp practices so far, Jermaine Carter's kind of been that middle linebacker guy. You bring in some other pieces. That linebacking core is got to produce. We've talked about it before. The front seven is essential for them to create and disrupt and create these opportunities for the defensive backs to hop on the ball. Dante Jackson, a freakish athlete, ready to pounce on the ball. Jeremy Chin, he's a great reader. He can make plays. This team's all about making plays on the back, but the front seven have to get there, and you have to have smart linebackers, and I think that's going to be a big question mark, probably the biggest question mark to me on the defense. I thought it was going to be the cornerbacks and the safeties. Turns out I'm more worried about the linebacking core right now.
Sure, I agree. And last year, what was surprising to me is, with the guys who were in the game last year, I thought the rushing would not be an issue. It would be the pass coverage for the linebackers that would put us in a tough spot. And really, we're not trying to pretend like we were great at pass coverage in the linebacking position, but the run was a big issue for us. And the linebackers got chewed up a lot last season. There were a lot of second-level blocks last year where our guys were just not getting penetration through the line, and they were letting people get blocks on them, 4 or 5 yards downfield. You just can't have that. I mean, that's big gains every time. So Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with the personnel last year in a young team coming into first, time head coaches coming together to try to put this team together. There's so many things to work out. There are so many things to
Yeah.
learn from when you're such a new, organization in terms of kind of hitting the reset button like that. So I think a lot of that's going to fix itself. But in terms of the linebacking core specifically, I think Shaq is a leader. I think they've established him as that leader there. I think he has every ability to be the same. You're not going to replace Luke Kuechly. I think Panther fans have a hard time looking at the linebacking core since then and feeling good about it because it's never going to be the same. But with that being said, I think Shaq does a great job. They've finally gotten him back outside where he belongs instead of playing that middle linebacker position. And I think Jermaine Carter is going to play on the outside this year. I think Denzel Perryman will run things from the middle. He did a really good job of doing that for the Chargers when he was playing there. And the Chargers had a really stout defense for a couple seasons. And Denzel Perryman was right there in the mix. I'm not going to sit and pretend like he was the only guy there who, the heart and soul of that Chargers defense. But if you're a middle linebacker, man, you're right in the mix of everything for whatever team you're playing for, whether you're good or bad. You're in the mix. So, to have a guy like Denzel Perryman who's seasoned to step into that role, who's played for good defenses before. I'm excited. What's concerning a little bit with these guys, especially defensively, is they're not even in pads yet. The length that these guys are getting in pads is shorter now, and everything's kind of thrown off a little bit because of how they've had to adjust the offseason for COVID and everything that's going on. And I know for a fact that Matt Rule has got to be foaming at the mouth, trying to get these guys in pads so that he can really get a sense of. I've seen Denzel Perryman in the weight room for 2 months now. I haven't even seen this guy put shoulder pads on yet.
The tackling ability.
He's going to learn a lot about his own players in the next 2 weeks, because next week they put pads on, and pads can make or break some guys. You know what I mean? So I'm excited to see them strap up and start getting physical, and Matt Rule can really start getting a sense of how he's going to piece his team together this season.
Yeah, I think piecing it together, and they've done a good job of adding pieces. A lot of veteran leadership that we've already mentioned. Daquan Jones has come in there from the Tennessee Titans. He's, helped Seton to turn around on defense. That he's brought in the Morgan Fox. A lot of pieces. David Screws, have you looked at the Patty Fisher's highlights? I'll admit, no. I have not seen Patty Fisher's highlights. I do know a couple things about him. I know he was an award winner at Northwestern. He's from Katy, Texas, which is right outside where I'm from because my family's from Houston, Texas. Outside of that, I don't know a whole lot about him. But if the guy can tackle, can make smart plays, and deserves to be on the roster, I think Matt Rule is a great evaluator of talent, and he'll find a spot for him to play.
Listen, I think it's underrated that, we talk about the quarterback position all the time and having these rookie quarterbacks step in, and it's so difficult because they're running an offense and they've got so many things to think about. Middle linebacker position should be held in the same regard, or very similar regard. If you're sitting there in the middle and you're calling that defense, you're making checks. You have to know what's going on. You have to be quick to the ball. If you're a step behind at middle linebacker, your team is going to be a step behind. So for a rookie man to step in and have to play at middle linebacker is tough. I'm all for developing the middle linebacker position the same way that you probably would want to for a quarterback position if you have that luxury. So, to have a guy like Patty Fisher who has a humongous upside and maybe has a lot of raw potential to kind of be, work the kinks out of a little bit. Let's see him put in the work. Let's see him play behind some guys like Shaq and Denzel Perryman and Jermaine Carter Jr. and just kind of see how that pans out for him and how his development process goes. Because you never know, 3 years down the line, he might be the guy. And then all of a sudden, Patty Fisher's name is a household name in Carolina football.
Yeah, I mean, and you never know, especially at that middle linebacker position. You don't know how they're going to react. Like, you can think in the weight room, and like you said, some things are not coachable. Some things you can't see. His reaction time, his ability to dissect a play happening is really important. And Luke Kuechly, to keep going back to him, is one of those guys that, like, he had an intangible thing about him. Like, he was a great athlete, solid tackler, excellent first reaction, but he had some innate ability or intangible ability to know exactly what was going to happen before it happens. If Patty Fisher,
I'll tell you what too, he worked harder than everybody else in that locker room
That
too.
is
So I
true.
mean, if Patty Fisher wants to be the next Luke Kuechly of the Carolina Panthers, I'll tell you what, the first thing he can do is come in an hour early and leave an hour late, because that's what Luke Kuechly did day in and day
You
out.
know, that's what Coach Matt Rule just said he wants from his players. That's what he wants from a leader. He doesn't want a vocal leader at quarterback in Sam Darnold. At least that's what he says in the latest press conference that he had. He said that he wants Sam Darnold to just work on his feet, work on his accuracy, be the first guy in, first guy out, lead by example. We have plenty of vocal leaders. He said we have Christian,
Sure.
DJ, Robbie, Shaq, and Brian and Jeremy Chin as vocal leaders. We need physical locker room playbook type leaders, and maybe that's where Patty Fisher can kind of find his comfort zone and being a clipboard leader on the sidelines. But if he gets in the field, you never know what's going to happen. It only takes one opportunity to shine, and he could be the next Dan Morgan, who just recently got rehired by the Panthers, and just be an absolute beast on and off the field. I would absolutely love to see that from Patty Fisher.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited for these guys to develop. If
I'm
these guys
beyond
adopt the
excited.
mentality of putting in the work, practicing behind guys like Christian McCaffrey, you can clearly tell come in, every day and put everything they have to the grind. Some of these guys are built for success. I mean,
Yeah,
you talk about guys like Brian Burns, like you talk about guys like Terrace Marshall Jr., J.C. Horn. These are not, undersized
they are
guys. Like they've
built
gone out and
different.
found big frames, quick guys. Like J.C. Horn could develop into a big physical corner who's still fast on the outside. A guy who can play like Richard Sherman, Jalen Ramsey, like physical guys who can play at all three levels of the defensive fields.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Terrace Marshall Jr., I already kind of harped on this, is a guy who I think can develop into a physical specimen where he's playing at all three levels of the football field on offense. Take like a guy like AJ Brown, for example. Now he's a little more highly coveted maybe
Mm-hmm.
than some of these guys, like a Terrace Marshall, but AJ Brown came in the league a big specimen, but hadn't hit an NFL weight room yet. There's something different about that, right? And but Tennessee went out and got a bunch of big young guys that they could build into big fast players, and they've
Yeah,
done that.
a
And
lot
Tennessee
of
is
that.
they're a contender now, man. They are. Their defense is big and fast, and they're scary, and people don't like playing them. And the Panthers are developing themselves into a similar style team. They're getting guys who have big athletic frames, who can fly around but still make physical plays on the football. And this is a team that I think certainly has a lot of potential this year. But I'll tell you what, Matt Rule has got this team ready for 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
I
This team has so much potential. It's scary.
I am excited to see how this season. I mean, I'm excited for every season, but I'm excited to see how this season wraps up, because I think next year is the one where they really hit the mountaintop, and they're on their way to having a lot of success. We talked about the NFC South being on the downside, hopefully being on the downside. We don't know how long Tom Brady's going to play, but David Screws mentions it. He feels like Matt Rule and Scott Fitterer are building a dynasty. I'm not sure I'm ready to say dynasty, but they have a lot of great pieces to have a solid foundation for many, many, many
Sure.
years. You have a lot
Sure.
of youth, a lot of young players that are coachable, appear to be coachable. And then those veterans that are coming in who have the experience. They've learned.
Mm-hmm.
They know what works. They know what doesn't work. These guys are good coaches of people, and these players seem to be very coachable players. So I'm excited to see it.
Sure.
I know we want to talk about the Charlotte Hornets here in a second. As always, this is All Access. We talk about sports in the Queen City and the Carolinas, so we'll be getting into the Hornets here in just a second. We'll go through some big draft things that they had happening and some offseason moves that they may or may not be making. So I just want to, get a couple thoughts on the offense. We've talked a lot about the defense for the Carolina Panthers. The offensive line, that has been the issue for many, many years. It continues to be the issue. What are we going to be having this year? What is that offensive line going to be looking like for the Carolina Panthers?
Man, that offensive line is a huge question mark, and it's honestly something I can't believe I didn't touch on earlier, really, when we were talking about Sam Darnold, because I think really the two go hand in hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have a quarterback who needs to be in the pocket in order to succeed, and like we said earlier, needs to be able to make subtle movement in order to escape pressure, but we can't be sending him out on runs. Like I know that he has the ability to make plays. We've seen these clips of Sam Darnold running 40 yards downfield, but that's not who he is, and that's not who we need him to be for us. So the offensive line, of course, this year, just like any year, is a huge piece. I mean, Bradley, from hearing me talk about it before, that I'm a massive believer that football is won from the inside out. If you want to win at its simplest level, get a good offensive line, get a good defensive line, and build everything else from there. So unfortunately for us, we've kind of built. I think we've built up our defensive line. That's really become the young core of our defense. On the offensive side, we've somewhat done the opposite. We've put all the pieces around the offensive line that are there to succeed. Now it's just a matter of getting that offensive line to work. The thing is, man, is I don't think you necessarily always need 5 superstars on an offensive line for it to be a good offensive line.
Patchwork can sometimes work.
Yes, and chemistry is the biggest thing. It's more about chemistry a lot of times than it is about actual individual guys who are, running the show on an offensive line. You need leadership there too. Mm-hmm. I'd say you need a solid left tackle or blindside tackle. But outside of that, man, if you can get guys who do their job, execute their role, play tough football on the offensive line, and can communicate with each other, then you can win football games. You can win with that group, So I think the Panthers are trying to build towards that. I think they're trying to keep guys together for, extended periods of time. Some of these guys on this line now have played with each other, even if it's been kind of being mixed around at different spots within this group. A lot of them have been together for a couple seasons now. And I think Matt Rule and these guys are hoping that, with the addition of maybe 1 or 2 names, that they can really build this offensive line into a cohesive unit off of some of the pieces that they already have, starting obviously with Taylor Moton, who they re-signed this offseason. And I know Panther fans are really excited about that.
Unfortunately, the Panthers probably shot themselves in the foot and cost them a couple $1 million by not re-signing Taylor Moton at the beginning of last season, when so many of us were already wanting that to happen. But to put the franchise tag on him, bring him back, he's now one of the highest paid offensive linemen in the league, and well deserving of it. But David Brown said it. I think we're going to learn a lot through the offseason. I think it's going to be very telling when they get to joint practices. I think the first one or is with the Colts. Maybe all of them are with the Colts. But I think we're going to find out a lot about this team there. Colts have a very good defense and extremely good offensive line. The Colts have one of the best in the league. I think them, Falcons, and the Dallas Cowboys have really good ones. So it's going to be good for this defensive front to go up against that great offensive line. David Screw says, this show rocks. Thank you so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, come out, hang out with us every Sunday and Thursday talking Carolina Panthers and Charlotte Hornets. Last thing before we move on to the Hornets, I'm going to throw over to you. But David Brown says, games are won and lost in the trenches without a doubt. And I 100% agree. Defensive front, offensive front. Do you have anything else that you want to say about the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah, sure, man. So just to speak on, joint practices for a second, I'm excited for that too, David, because I wanted to touch on that. I saw you commented that earlier. Joint practices not only are a great chance to get in pads and just start getting into contact, getting into the flow of real football, but, another thing that it really does for your team is it shows how you communicate and how you stay level-headed or don't in the face of some adversity, right? When you practice with these guys for months and weeks, there is a sense of comfortability that shows up there. You start to learn the sets, the formations, the plays. You really start to get a feel for each individual player on the practice field. And so there are, things that might be a little different, obviously, when you're going into a joint practice with a new team who's going to be running out of new sets. And these are new players, and you're trying to prove that your team's better, man. It's the first time that you're strapping up and going against people until the preseason starts. And a lot of these guys are trying to earn their spot on the field and earn that last spot in, a couple sets on offense or a blitz package on defense. So I love joint practices. I think it really shows how well you are established as a team in terms of communication, how ready you are for the quarterback to get the play from the coach and bring it into the huddle and get that team set up before the play clock's out. Like, joint practices show you as a nice mile marker how ready you are for preseason. And then obviously preseason is a mile marker for how ready are you for the regular season.
Yeah, and I cannot wait for this regular season. One extra game this year for the 2021-2022 campaign. For for the Carolina Panthers, and I am excited to see that get underway. But we're going to kind of shift our focus now over to the Charlotte Knights. Excuse me, not the Charlotte Knights, the Charlotte Hornets. I have baseball on the mind, man. They were in the 10th inning when we hopped on here. I was all into that game. But the Charlotte Hornets NBA draft was earlier this week. Charlotte Hornets didn't take who we all expected in the first round and until they did take who we thought they were going to take. So let's hear it. What's Gray's thoughts on the Charlotte Hornets draft they had?
Man, I'm excited. I unfortunately didn't pay attention to college basketball this year, probably as closely as I would have liked to. It was a tough year for it, man. But at the same time, obviously I looked into the draft for my fair share as it came up, and I pay attention to the NBA as much as the next guy. And so, looking at this, I obviously came in knowing I think a lot of people had a higher grade on Book Night than we picked him at. I would say that there were several mock drafts that I looked at where he was going around 5, 6, 7. But there had to have been teams that had a top 5 grade on him, if not, like I said, a top 7 grade on him. So for him to fall to 11, I think is super interesting. I think he is another big athletic player to add to this team. You talk about now that you've got him at 6'4" at shooting guard, and with as athletic as he is alongside Miles Bridges at small forward and PJ Washington, and then LaMelo is a big guard. So this team suddenly has gotten pretty big, and it's a lot of young players still, but you give these guys a couple years, you give LaMelo 3 years, you give Book Night 3 years, you give Miles Bridges another year or two. These guys are really going to start looking like NBA stars, like a Giannis, if you look at his progression.
Love that.
And now looking at what he's doing. So I think the Hornets have a lot to look forward to, man. And they've got a couple veterans still in place there that are going to help out those young guys if they can stay healthy. So I'm excited for this team. I think the only direction for them is up. I do expect a contention for playoff. I think they'll be right there on the cusp again from what it's looking like. And I'll tell you what, man, out of everything that's going on with them, as boring as this might sound, the most exciting thing to me about the Hornets actually has to be James Borrego. I love what he's done with that team. Yeah. I think he's smart. He gets a lot of guys involved in the mix. I think he really has them going in the right direction. With the resources you have as a Hornets head coach in a small market, working with young players, I think he's done a fabulous job.
Yeah, the city of Charlotte and the state of the Carolinas has done an excellent job with young talent. You mentioned a lot of these guys: Malik Monk, PJ Washington, Miles, LaMelo, the 2 new draft picks. All of these guys are within their first 3 years of the league. Malik might have been his third of this past year.
Well, I think Malik's about to be an unrestricted free agent, so he may end up signing elsewhere. But still a good core of players.
A great group of core players. And I think Malik Monk at this point, because you bring in Book Night, I think he becomes, unfortunately, expendable, but maybe it's a huge trade piece that you can use and find yourself an actual big besides Mason Plumlee, who they also picked up on draft day in a trade. David says, best draft the Hornets have had in at least a decade, and he says that confidently without even seeing them hit the NBA floor yet. Yeah, I think credit goes to Mitch Kupchak. What a tremendous job he has done with contracts, bringing in players, signing players, dealing with contract issues that you would deal with.
Certainly making an active effort, man. Making an active effort.
Yeah, and it's something that we're not familiar with, especially with Cho running everything when he was doing it. So it's good to see. I think Carolina Panthers and the Hornets are doing a great job with these youthful squads that they have going on. You have Rozier and Gordon Hayward, and then a bunch of young guys that can absolutely put up points. This is going to be an explosive team. They're going to be solid in transition, great above the rim. You have 4 or 5 guys now that I feel confident can catch lobs from LaMelo at any point in time. And that's not to mention Devontae Graham, who's still sitting back there, who had a tremendous D-League career, and then first half season in the league was absolutely phenomenal. So I'm excited. Who are you more excited to see on this team? Is it Kai Jones or is it Book Night?
I've got to say it's James Book Night. I mean, in the little basketball that I watched from this season, he stood out on UConn. He's their best player. UConn's a consistently good basketball program.
It's a good place to draft players from.
I agree, man. And hey, I mean, the Hornets went there once before with a guy named Kemba Walker, and he turned out to be all right.
Don't forget about Emeka
So,
Okafor.
there
Come
you
on,
go.
man.
You took that too. Hey, man, he was good for them for a while, so you'll take that too.
Darn right.
I guess what I'm saying is UConn players, there's something about them a lot of times, and
Yeah.
this guy stood out there. He made his name known, and he's one of those guys where you look at him and it's hard to argue that he's going to not translate well to the NBA with his size, speed, strength, ability, his ability to attack the rim off the dribble. His shot is certainly there in terms of it being something that people are
Yeah.
going to have to worry about. You can't just ignore him on the perimeter entirely. So I'm excited. They got a very versatile player who can potentially do a lot for them in some time. Do I think that Book Knight is playing in the starting lineup day one? Absolutely not. Do I think that he's
agree.
do I think that he's even a six man by the end of the season? I'd probably say no, just because of how much talent is on this team. However, again, rookies in the NBA, it's crazy, man. People are coming in younger and younger. This guy's 20 years old. So you've got guys playing around him who are 6, 7 years older than that. There's going to be a lot of competition there who's bigger, stronger, faster potentially. But you give this guy 2 seasons, along with LaMelo, you give him another season or two. They're going to get bigger. Their basketball IQ in the NBA is going to get better. And I think the Hornets are headed in the right direction.
Yeah, you get that healthy LaMelo for a full year. I don't see how their trajectory is nowhere but up. So we've been on here a little bit longer than we thought we were going to be, but it's been a big time. It was our homecoming, so to speak, for All Access. If you're hopping in here and you're late in here, you can always catch the replay on YouTube. Find it on Spotify. Find it on iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your audio forms. You can get All Access there. Take us with you wherever you go. Gray, do you have any closing remarks on anything we've covered today? Anything that we haven't covered? Maybe you do want to talk about the Charlotte Knights.
I do have a closing remark, actually. I got to shout out an ex-Panther, a retired NFL player. Wish he would have retired a Panther. Unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity to. However, Kurt Coleman, whose jersey I have put on today, it does say Coleman on the back. This is a Kurt Coleman jersey I ordered custom. Loved Kurt Coleman. In 2015, that was my guy. Every time they went out into the defense, I always said the second best player on this defense right now behind Luke Kuechly is Kurt Coleman, and I would stand by that. So
he was the battery,
man. At least for that season, man, he ran that secondary. Thieves Avenue, Kurt Coleman was that man.
He was that dude.
So hear me out. I got to shout my guy Kurt Coleman because the other day, I can't remember who it was on Twitter. I wish that I did, but somebody within the Panther community tweeted that thing. It's that meme that says like recognition, and it's like a small bar, and then talent. And it's like the huge bar. And they said, which Panthers player in Panthers history do you think of when you see this? And right away, I retweeted with a quote, and I said, my guy Kurt Coleman absolutely used to love this guy. Like essentially just calling out Kurt Coleman, like who was one of my favorite guys, man. He was solid, and I said I wish he would have retired a Panther, and sure enough, I tagged him in it, and Kurt Coleman liked and retweeted it for me. He gave me the little love back, and then I commented on it after I saw that he had checked it out, and I posted a picture of me in the jersey, and I was like, man, I was such a big fan. Like you have no idea. Like I always did the flex, and he'd get tackles and stuff. Yeah, the Kurt Coleman flex. Keep flexing on Kurt Cole. So I got to shout out Kurt Coleman before we end out the podcast today, because the other day he gave me a little shout on Twitter, and I appreciated it.
Dude, I absolutely love that. If you haven't already, make sure you follow us all_access_sports, or you can just search All Access. You find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We would love to have you over there. We are going to be back here hopefully every Sunday and Thursday from now until the end of the football season. You'll see myself, Gray, probably a little Mackie here and there if we never get him out of the bedroom where he's always just being lazy. We'll see if we can get him back on the show eventually, and the three of us will knock this one out, man.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm sure we can get him awake for one of these nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the All Access Podcast, your home for Charlotte sports in the Carolinas and the Queen.